One could never forget that house. The house on the corner of Maple and Orchard. It was a dilapidated Victorian wonder. The once vibrant paint was now cadaverous grey, and peeling like a biblical leper. The ancient shutters would flap in the slightest breeze, smashing against the side of the house with a thunderous clap. There were 5 old trees surrounding the house, one at each corner, and one halfway up the cracked and uneven sidewalk. None of these had produced leaves in the better part of a decade. The aesthetics of the place alone were enough to cause the rumors of haunting, but the dark, twisted appearance on the outside was only the mildest of previews as to what was in the heart of that house. The former owner, Tristan McAllister, has permanently left his mark on the small town of Brooks End. Mr. McAllister was thought to be one of the greatest men the small community had ever produced. When he opened his leather-working shop in the latter part of the 1940s, the town finally began to see some revenue. Everybody loved the man, especially the local kids. You see, he would rotate through them, allowing one of them to run his store, while he went once a month to his leather-working seminars. It wasn't until after his untimely demise in 1998 that any of his dark secrets came to light. Mr. McAllister, at the ripe old age of 75, was found murdered in his living room. Someone had overpowered the old man and pierced his heart with the broken leg of a chair. The town was baffled as to why anyone would want to kill this man, that an entire community looked at as an example of greatness. The questions stopped though, as the last of the crime scene tape was hung. The crime scene investigation began like any other. They swept the house one room at a time. The main floor and upstairs were normal enough, just a dusty old couch and bed, a picture of Mr. McAllister and the late Mayor Compton, books on lethal working, and countless other odds and ends that you would expect to find in the house of an old man. But when they opened the door to the basement, no one could have guessed that they were opening the gateway to hell. As the first officer began his descent down the creaky old steps, he had the misfortune of finding the light switch. Once that switch was flipped, there was no turning back, no way to prevent the revelations from pouring forth like a river straight from hell. It took a couple of seconds for the single naked bulb to flicker into life, and there was an electric hum as the halogen lights at the bottom of the stairs turned on. Once the officer's eyes adjusted to the newfound light, he quickly realized that this was going to prove to be more than a murder scene. All along the walls of the stairwell were newspaper clippings from other towns, new and old, some from as far as 50 miles away. All the clippings portrayed a smiling face, accompanied by a brief story of how the pictured had gone missing, the oldest dating back to the summer of 1947. The investigator found this as odd, but what sent chills down his spine was the fact that each and every clipping had large black numbers written on them, ranging from 1 to 73. The horrors didn't stop there, however. At the bottom of the stairs was an old wooden bookshelf. This bookshelf contained a series of medical books, more books on leatherworking, 2 books on acids, an edition of hallucinogens and their effect on the human mind, and a book entitled, Butcher's Basics, How to Select the Best Cuts of Meat. On the bottom shelf, however, was a series of 14 leather-bound journals. The secrets of these pages would not come to light until the following day. The investigative team continued the search of the basement, and came across a mini kitchen located in the center of the room. On the counter was a wide array of bloody butcher's tools. Off to the left of the counter was a pair of old Frigidaire freezers. Inside these they found hundreds of white packages of meat, all neatly labeled with its contents: roast, tongue, liver, and ground meat. In the far corner of the room was a blood-soaked chair that was missing one leg. There were heavy chains embedded into the wall, and at the ends of these chains, laying in a pool of coagulated blood, were shackles. The investigators, having seen enough to convince them that atrocities had been committed here, quickly gathered and bagged all the evidence in the basement. Everything was taken back to the lab. The broken chair leg was sent out for fingerprinting, a few packages of meat were sent out for testing, but the journals ended up on the desk of Detective Michael Patterson. As the detective read these books, he came across 73 entries. Each entry describing in horrific detail the seduction, abduction, rape, and murder of each and every face found on the wall in the stairwell. Apparently, Mr. McAllister, when attending his leatherworking seminars, would drive out to other towns. When he got there, he would shop the bars, as one would shop for groceries, as he described it in the journals. He would select the individual, male or female, with the saddest story, or the one that was looking for a way out of the town. He would promise them jobs, sex, money, or whatever it was that they wanted. Once he had them committed to his cause, he would tell them to meet him in the parking lot in an hour. He did this so as to avoid being seen leaving together. He would then pay for the person's drink and leave. He would sit in his old beat-up Chevy for the next hour waiting for his prey to take the bait. When they arrived at his truck, they would then drive back to his house. Upon arrival at the house, he would drug them, rape them and shackle them to the chair, found in the basement. He would then prepare for the murder. He claimed in his journals that nothing went with murder like a good Pinot Noir. Once he had the table prepared, he would begin his butchery. He would take his victim to the table and slit their throats. Once the victim was deceased, he would then skin and hang them like a deer. He would dry the skins out and turn it into the leather he used for his shop. The meat he would cut, package, and freeze for later use. He also wrote of how he disposed of the remains. He would take them to his workshop and place the remains in 50-gallon drums of acid he kept behind the store. He would dissolve the bodies down to a bloody soup and then drag the drums down to the Carlington River for the fish to devour. When the story hit the papers, the entire community was appalled. Everyone had purchased products from McAllister Leather Works. But what disgusted them the most, and led three to commit suicide, was the fact that every year at the Community Days Festival, Mr. McAllister was in charge of the barbecuing, always insisting that he provide the meat, that same meat, that was found so nicely wrapped in his basement. After that apocalyptic revelation, the residents of Brooks End wanted to be done with Tristan McAllister, but more so, they wanted to know the identity of their savior. Who was it that killed the Brooks End butcher, putting an end to over 50 years of terror? All they could do was wait for a match on the fingerprints lifted from the chair leg point. When the results came back, they were more astonishing than the town's annual cannibalistic picnic. The fingerprints belonged to a Miss Joan Stallworth, who just happened to be victim 17, murdered in 1958. Was this the work of a vigilante who just happened to pick the one leg of the chair that only Joan had touched? Or was this indeed a case of revenge, fulfilled by the ghost of a murdered woman? There are stories supporting both. You decide what you want to believe, but if you look at Old House on the corner of Maple and Orchard, it is said that you can see the figure of a young woman standing in the living room window. The figure is believed to be holding a chair leg, smiling and waving, as if to say, "It's okay, it's all over now." The end.